Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sonia Kurmi, and I'm a registered dietitian and a certified diabetes educator. I work at Langs, which is a community health center here in Cambridge. So I work in the diabetes program, and I'm here to present on the heart healthy eating. So a few things that we will be talking about in our presentation is about the cardiovascular disease, types of fat in the blood, dietary fats, sugar and salt. We'll also talk about soluble fiber and plant sterols. And at the end, we will cover about the Mediterranean diet. Just a few things. I saw a few people already aware of the chat feature. So yeah, if you have any questions during the presentation, please feel free to use the chat box and you can ask me the question and I'm happy to answer them. At the end of the presentation, we do have an evaluation poll. So we really appreciate your feedback on that. And I also encourage everybody to participate again using the chat box. So before we start the presentation, I just wanted everybody to think about maybe one change that you would like to make today to eat better. We will be talking a lot about nutrition, and sometimes we may come up with a lot of changes that we might have to make in our lifestyle. So when we try to make a lot of changes, it can be overwhelming too. So it's a good idea to maybe think about one small realistic thing that we can work on at a time, and that can help to reach our, bigger goal of being healthy. So heart and blood vessel disease, narrowing of the blood vessels, it's the second leading cause of death in Canada. The early detection and management of medical conditions such as high blood pressure, diabetes, and high cholesterol can help you reduce the risk of your heart disease. So as you can see in this picture, if we have high blood pressure or high cholesterol levels, they do cause these tiny tears in our blood vessels. And that is where the plaque can build up in the walls of the arteries, and this makes it narrows for the blood to flow through. So we're just looking at what kind of, what affects that. So looking at the risk factors. So there are a few risk factors that we can't change, and then there are a few risk factors that we can change. So something that we can't change is our family history. If we have diabetes, that again puts us at risk for heart problems, and age. And then there are a few risk factors that we can change, and that's where we're talking about, currently smoking. So if you can quit smoking, that can greatly reduce your risk for getting heart problems. Lack of physical activity, so trying to find ways how can we incorporate that regular physical activity. Eating healthy can again help with, reducing our risk. Being overweight, so trying to find again ways on how can we manage weight or lose weight. High blood pressure, so managing that. High cholesterol and high blood sugar, so management of these blood pressure, cholesterol or high blood sugars can greatly reduce the risk of heart problems. There was something in the chat box. I'm just going to check quickly. Oops. For some reason, I can't access the chat box. Oops. Oh, okay. Sorry. I thought it was a question. I'm so sorry. All right. So we'll keep moving. So why do we want to follow a heart healthy diet? So up to 80% of early heart disease and stroke can be prevented by adopting healthy behaviors that include eating a healthy diet and eating a heart healthy diet and making other healthier lifestyle choices. That is, like we talked about, being active, avoiding smoking. It could be maybe managing or losing weight if you have to. So that can greatly reduce our risk of heart disease. So let's look at what are the different types of fats in blood. So there are three main types, and this is something that you will find if you have gone for cholesterol blood work. That is where you will find these fats listed on that. These are blood cholesterol, sorry. So they are called like LDL, HDL, and triglycerides. They all are found in your blood, not in foods. That's why they are blood cholesterol. So we call the LDL as the bad or the lousy cholesterol because it contributes to the blockages in the arteries. So unfortunately, we have too much of LDL buildup. That is where it can lead to the blockages. So this is just an example of what a healthy artery may look like and what artery may look like where it's a lot of LDL or that plaque buildup. And then the HDL is known as the good cholesterol or your healthy cholesterol because it's helping to prevent those blockages in the arteries. It's removing that LDL and then leaving that cholesterol in the liver for disposal. And triglycerides, so similarly, like LDL and HDL, triglycerides are also not found in the foods we eat. Our body makes the triglycerides from what we eat and drink. If we have too much high triglycerides, it can also, cause that thickening of the blood and increase the clotting. So moving on to what kind of fats affect these cholesterols and what kind of fats help with improving these cholesterols. So we'll talk about that. So there are different types of fats. We call them as unsaturated fats. And unsaturated fats also consist of your monounsaturated and polyunsaturated, which also includes omega-3s in them. Saturated fat, and then there's another type called trans fat. So unsaturated fats are the ones that are coming mainly from your vegetables, your nuts, and your seeds, so all those plant-based fats. And some of the examples of these fats are olive oil, canola, peanut, sesame, flaxseed oil, avocado oil, sunflower, safflower. So those are all different varieties of these plant-based oils. And a lot of these nuts and seeds also have healthier fats in them. So when we choose these fats, they are helping to lower down that LDL, which is the bad cholesterol. And some of these fats also help with improving our good cholesterol, which is the HDL. So that is where we want to choose these healthier fat sources more often. And omega-3 also is helping towards lowering the triglycerides, and it also helps with improving that good cholesterol. So some of the sources of omega-3 is fish. So if you like having fish, it's recommended that you have at least 2 servings twice a week. So you can have what a serving looks like is like closer to your palm size, which is around 3 ounces of your cooked portion of meat. So that's what the serving size is. And some of the fatty fishes are salmon, sardines, mackerel, trout, herring. There are a lot of nuts and seeds that also have omega-3 in them. And the examples are like your walnuts, flax seeds when they are ground. So that's where you're receiving the omega-3 benefits. Chia seeds, hemp seeds, sunflower, pumpkin seeds. So those are all your good sources of omega-3. Anything that's fortified with omega-3 too, like for example, omega-3 egg whites. So those would be also the sources of omega-3. So yes, so something to again consider because it's helping towards lowering down that triglycerides and helping with the good cholesterol. And then saturated fats. So yes, saturated fats can affect our LDL cholesterol, which is the bad one. But I also wanted to say that not all saturated fats are unhealthy. So it all again depends on how much you're having. So some of the fat sources, saturated fat sources are like high fat meats, your full fat dairy, butter, lard, tropical oils like coconut oil, palm oil, and the goods that are made from these fats. So that is where the saturated fats are coming from. The thing is, if we're having too much of saturated fat in our diet, that is where it can still affect our LDL. So trying to keep these kind of fats in moderation. So we do have a few tips here on how can you reduce the saturated and the trans fats from your diet. So if you're choosing dairy products, choose lower fat dairy products, so 1% or skim, When you're choosing cheese, just right where the brand name is on the corner, there is MF, that's the milk fat percentage. So looking for that to be under 20%. Choose healthier snacks, and healthier snack options could be, you can choose whole grain, like whole wheat crackers, or whole grain crackers with, let's say, hummus as a dip, or it could be low fat cheese or any nut butters. It could be unsalted nuts as your healthy snack. A small cup of low fat yogurt can be a healthy snack. A high fiber granola bar can be a healthy snack. Fruit can be a healthy snack. So just trying to choose those healthier snacks when you do need to have snacks. Using more of the plant-based oils, which we just talked about, like olive, canola, sunflower, safflower, flaxseed, whichever one you have it, but try to choose those plant-based oils more often, and using less oil in cooking. Choosing leaner meats, so chicken, fish, turkey, pork tenderloin, sirloin, so any leaner cuts of the meat. Trim the fat, take the skin off. That's how you're making it lower fat. And limit the size of the meat to the size of the palm of your hand, which we just talked about. And also trying to choose a little bit of those meatless dishes. So that is where we're talking about like beans, lentils, legumes, peas, or any soybean foods like tofu. So those are your lower fat, and they also have a little bit of fiber in them. So they are like good sources of your protein there. And choosing lower fat cooking methods, which include baking, grilling, broiling, steaming, poaching. So avoid the deep frying. Any questions? Okay, I'm just going to keep checking the chat in between just to make sure there are no questions here. And then just a few of those strategies around how can you lower the triglycerides. So we talked about incorporating that omega-3 fat. So that is where at least having 2 or 3 servings of that fatty fish twice a week. You can incorporate nuts, again, 1/4 cup but choose unsalted nuts. Reduce the intake of added sugars, and we'll talk about what added sugars are in a few slides, but just trying to reduce your added sugar intake. Limit the intake of alcohol if you know that you drink a little more alcohol. So that is where we want to limit or avoid if we can. Eating meals at regular times can also help with lowering down the triglycerides. So what regular times would be like eating 3 meals per day and trying to space them no more than 6 hours apart, and incorporating physical activity. So that is something that may again help with lowering down the triglycerides. And the last type of fat where we talked about the trans fat, so that is something that we want to completely avoid. A little bit that naturally comes from your meats, from your dairy sources or poultry is okay. It's something that we want to avoid is the processed foods, because that's where the trans fats are added, because they want to increase the shelf life of the food or improve the taste and texture of the food. So again, there's no known health benefit from having trans fat, so we don't want to have too much, again, coming from these processed foods, because if we have too much, as we know, that they can affect your LDL, and it also helps, not helps, it kind of lowers down your good cholesterol. So that's why we don't want those trans fat in our diet. So some of the examples of trans fats would be like hard margarines, vegetable shortening, commercially baked goods like cookies, donuts, muffins, right? Even the partially hydrogenated oils will have trans fats, so trying to avoid those, and trying to keep those saturated fats in moderation, but choosing more of your healthier fat sources more often. So this is what your nutrition label will look like for the product. So every product does have a nutrition facts table, and that's where you will see the saturated fat, and the trans fats are always listed there, just so then you know how much has been added in the product. So trans fat, that is where we want to look for 0 gram trans fats. We don't want any trans fat coming in our food. And we'll talk about the other things too a little later in our presentation, like how much of saturated fat, how much of sodium we should be looking at. So we'll talk about that for sure. So just starting with, reducing your saturated fat and gradually increasing your unsaturated fats. So choosing those fats more often and reducing your saturated and, of course, the trans fats. So to help lower that bad cholesterol, the LDL cholesterol, we want to replace our saturated fats with unsaturated fats. So again, choosing more of your healthier fats, so plant-based oils, nuts and seeds. You can choose nut butters or seed butters. Olives, you can rinse them to reduce the salt intake. Avocado is a good healthy source of fat. If you're choosing margarines, you can choose non-hydrogenated margarine, and also incorporating that fatty fish for that omega-3 benefits. A lot of times the question comes around here whether butter is better or margarine. So I would just say, if you do choose butter, just trying to ask yourself, how much are you going to use it, and how often are you going to use it, because butter is a source of saturated fat. It's an animal fat. So with margarines, again, it depends on what kind of fats are being added. Sometimes they start adding, palm oil kernels. So that is where you can see the saturated fat amounts on the higher side. So just trying to read labels, compare where can you find lower saturated fats, and then just trying to keep those things in moderation. So moving on to the sugar, just wanted to ask anyone if anybody has any question around the fats before we move on to the next topic of sugars. All right, so we'll move on. So what are the effects of having too much of added sugar? It does affect our triglycerides. It can decrease the good cholesterol, which is the HDL. It may also cause inflammation. So that is where we're talking about not having too much of added sugars. So there's a difference between natural sugars and added sugars. So the natural sugars would be the sugars that are found in your food, in your fruits, your vegetables, and your milk. But think about that when we do eat a fruit, yes, we do get sugar from it, but we also get a lot of other nutrients with that. So we also get vitamin C, there's fiber coming from that, there's potassium, there's a lot of other vitamins and minerals. Same as with your milk. When you drink milk, yes, you do get a little bit of sugar naturally in that milk, but you also get protein, there's calcium, right? So there's so many other essential nutrients when we do have these foods that have natural sugar in them. But when we have the sugars that are added to many foods, whether it's for processing or while they're preparing that food to add taste, to add texture, color, or preservative. So some of the sources of your added sugars are like sugar, honey, molasses, maple syrup, all your soft drinks, your cola drinks are all with added sugar. Juices are full of added sugars. So think about when the foods have too much of added sugar, what other nutritional benefits are they giving to you? Right? So that is where we want to think about the natural source of sugar and the added sugar. And yeah, there are other sources where you can see a lot of added sugars would be like your baked goods, a lot of granola bars full of sugar, cereals, yogurt. So there are many, many products out there which may have a lot of added sugar. So we want to read labels and be aware of how much the product is carrying the sugar, and we want to choose less sugar in our diet. So avoiding those added ones. So when you read the labels, one is ingredients list that will give you the information of what's being added to the product. So you may not just find the word sugar. So there are other names for sugar too, which end with O's or syrup in the end. So some of the examples are on this slide. As you can see, sucrose, there's glucose, fructose, dextrose, maltose, cane or beet sugar, honey, maple syrup, molasses, agave nectar. So the different names for sugar, the more you see them on the ingredients list, the higher the amount of sugar will be in the product. So that is one way of looking at the label and recognizing what other sources of sugar have been added to the product. The other one is looking at the label itself, the nutrition facts table. So you want to follow these steps first. Look at the nutrition facts table and determine if there's anything, any product that's under 5 grams of sugar per serving. So when we look at the serving, I'm not sure if you all can see the mouse here. So that's the serving size on top, which is 3/4 cup. And like for this label, it is 1 cup. All the nutrients below here are based on that serving size. So I want you all to answer using the chat box. Do you see anything that's under 5 grams per serving here for sugar? So you can just say yes, no, whatever way you want to, just type it in the chat. No. Okay. Yeah, I got a few answers here. Thank you. So then we go to the step 2, and it says determine if the sugar is added or natural. So let's take a look at this label. So here in product 1, we do see the added sugar, and that is here your fructose. And the other product just has the ingredients as your milk and vitamin D. So as we know now that the product 1 is a source of added sugar and the product 2 is your natural source of sugar, it's your milk. So if you look at the serving size 2, it's 3/4 cup and 1 cup, but other nutrients that you see in this product 1, there's nothing that you're getting any benefit here, like except for all these added sugar. And it's a little bit more high in carb amounts too here. It's higher in sodium as compared to this product 2. And if you look at this product 2 here, you're getting like just as, less carbs. And then of course, it's a good source of protein there and your calcium. So that is where you're also getting other nutrients with that. So always look at the ingredients first. And if you're reading the nutrition facts table, look at if you can find anything under 5 grams of sugar per serving. If you can't, then that is where I would say try to also see if it's an added source of sugar or is it a natural source of sugar. So how much is the recommended amount of sugar per day for us? For men, up to 9 teaspoons per daily, for men per day, and then for women, it's 6 teaspoons per day. But if you look at the amount that we eat on average, is 26 teaspoons. So it's a lot of sugar that we're already getting in our diet. If anyone here ever drinks juice or pop, again, take a look at the label of your juices and pop. One serving can be close to 36 or 40 grams of sugar in it. So that's exceeding the total daily intake of sugar. And also remember, sugar is included in all the food products we eat daily. It's not just the sugar we are adding to our food and drinks. So just some of the tips on how you can reduce that added sugar. So limit the amount of sugar that you add to your food and beverages, such as the sugar, honey, if you're adding any syrup or, using other sources of added sugar. So limit that. You can always buy plain varieties and add your, you can add sweetness to it yourself. So for example, if you bought plain yogurt or plain like cereal or oats, you can always add, let's say, cinnamon to it or nutmeg. You can also add some vanilla extract to it, or you can top it up with some fruits to add that natural sweetness to it and then some flavor there too. And when you're buying those commercial food and beverages, try to choose the ones that are low in added sugars and read labels to determine if it's a source of natural sugar or is it a source of added sugar. So yeah, there's a question around real maple syrup, so it will still be your source of added sugar. So just keeping it in limit, right? Not saying that you can't have it at all, so just trying to keep the amounts less. Any other questions? Okay, so we'll move on to the salt. And please feel free to type in your question if there are any. I will be checking the chat in between, so I'm happy to answer all those questions. So sodium is an essential nutrient found in salt in many foods. Our bodies do need a small amount of sodium to be healthy, but when we have too much of sodium in our diet, that can lead to high blood pressure, even a major factor for stroke, heart disease, and kidney disease. So the recommended amount of sodium per day is less than 2,300 milligrams, which is a teaspoon of salt. And the amount that we eat on average is 2,760 milligrams. So again, a lot of sodium. So let's see, where is all the sodium coming from? So 11% naturally occurs in our food. 12% is added during cooking or at the table, and then the majority comes from the food processing. So this table is here to show what a natural source of sodium might look like in the food itself, and then when it's being processed, how much the amounts are being added to it. So for example, is plain pasta may have its natural sodium of 5 milligrams, but when you have pasta and sauce, half a can can have up to 600 milligrams. A cucumber may have 2 milligrams of natural sodium. When you have the pickle, it's 526 milligram. Fresh salmon, 53 milligrams of natural sodium. But when you have canned salmon, even half a can can have up to 450 milligrams. Same as with cheese. So cheddar cheese versus processed cheese, you will see a lot more in the processed. And coffee, if you have just the coffee with cream and sugar, it can also have its natural sodium. But when you have those flavored coffees like cappuccino, hot chocolate, French vanilla, all those specialty coffees, they can also have large amount of sodium in them. So just something to be aware of, like when these things are being processed, a lot of sugars and sodium or unhealthy fats are being added to again improve the taste, the texture of the food, or for even preservation purposes. And then the restaurant sources. So here, this slide is more to compare with if you were to make your own home prepared meal versus when you order it from a restaurant, how much a sodium difference can be. So if you were to order a meal from the restaurant, which is like fast food grilled chicken sandwich, medium French fries, if you have a little bit of ketchup and have milkshake, that meal can be closer to 2,098 milligrams of sodium. And as we just learned, that less than 2,300 milligrams is the amount per day. It's the recommended amount per day. So that one meal is giving you already 2,000 milligrams of sodium. You still have to have other meals too. So that's when you are exceeding your sodium amounts. But if you were to make that same kind of a meal at home, where you can have like grilled chicken breast, baked potato, even if you add a little bit of sour cream, have some vegetables, and then drink a glass of milk, that is way lower in sodium as compared to that restaurant meal. So here we calculated this meal as like 300 milligrams of sodium. So that is more, again, healthy. It's lower in sodium. You also got a little bit of that variety, so it's not that processed too. So again, going back to basics, where if you can have more of your home prepared meals, there's a lot of things that you can control on your own. But when you buy things from outside, we can control those ingredients that's being added to those foods. And when you are looking at, let's say, everybody needs that change. We do go out and eat or we order takeout. So maybe trying to see if they have like any nutrition information available and you can choose wisely, like which are the foods that might be lower in sodium or healthier choices. So that could be something that you may want to look into. So how would you know that how much sodium the product carries? So that is where you can always read the ingredients list. So just like sugar, you may not just find the word salt or sodium in the ingredients list. There are other names for sodium too. And these are just some of the examples, like sodium chloride, sodium phosphate, monosodium glutamate, sodium benzoate, baking soda. So they're all different names for sodium. The more you see them on the list, the higher the amount of sodium in the product. And then the next thing is the label, so the nutrition facts table. So that is where you will get that information. So here we'll talk about this person daily value here that you see at the far right hand side of the label. So these person daily values are a quick way to look at the label to know which nutrient is less in a product and which nutrient is more in a product. So as you can see here, it's kind of a speedometer here, like where it says like anything under 5% means it's less, anything over 15% means it's more. So that is a good guide to refer to when you're looking at the labels in the grocery store and trying to decide what is low or what is high. So anything that's under 5%, so if you look at this label, so fat-wise, cholesterol, you can see the carbs here, fiber here. So they're all under 5%, which means they are less in this product. So anything above 15%, we just learned that it means it's more. So we know that sodium is 28%, means this product is very high in sodium. So when we're looking at saturated fats, sodium, so look for under 5% daily value. That would mean that it has less of that. Even if you can find anything under 10% for sodium, will still be considered as your better choice, lower sodium. And same as with saturated fat, if you can find anything that's under 9%, will still be, again, better. But try not to, so avoid or limit, I would say, try not to look for the sodium and saturated fats. If they're above 15%, then try to see, can you find another product that might be a little bit lower? For fiber, so fiber, we'll learn the benefits of fiber shortly, but fiber is something that you want to look for over 15% daily value, unless it's restricted to you for other reasons. But fiber, again, helps with lowering down that cholesterol, so that is where we're looking at, aiming for higher number there. So a few tips again on how can we lower down that sodium in our diet. So avoid adding salt at the table or in cooking. Try to limit salty foods. So, you know, example like processed meats, cheese, canned products. If there are any snack foods that are higher in sodium, so try to limit them. When you're reading labels, again, look for lower sodium food products, and try making your own food, like your soups, your sauces, salad dressings, because that is where you can, again, control a lot of ingredients. And remember, as you slowly decrease your salt intake, your taste buds will adjust. Any questions? I'm just going to take 1 minute pause here just to make sure if anybody has questions, please, you can write down in the chat box before we move on to the next topic. Any questions around the fats, the salt, the sugar topic that we just talked about? So one of the somebody just shared that they found a trans fat-free cheese from Black Diamond available at Loblaws. So something else that you want to watch in that cheese is also the saturated fats. So we just talked about in one of our slides, when you're looking at the cheese, you know, there's that milk fat percentage, MF, that's always written on the top of the product where the brand name is. So that should be under 20%. So that is something that you also want to look into. And one of the question was how much salt per day. So we just learned about less than 2,300 milligrams of sodium per day, which is a teaspoon. So that is the recommended amount per day. Any other questions? All right, so we'll move on to our next topic. And if there were any questions again, please feel free to use the chat box. So let's move on to the recommendations for fat. So how much of fat should we have? So 20 to 35% of total caloric intake for the fat. So again, fat, protein, and carbohydrates are the main nutrients that make up the food. So they're known as the macronutrients, and they all have their daily intake amounts. So that is where we're talking about the fats. So when we say 20 to 35% of total calorie intake for the day, what it means is that for women, having 45 to 75 grams a day, and men 60 to 105 grams a day. I just want to make a note here that these are just the general recommendations. If you have any, different goals around, let's say it could be weight or managing, again, your cholesterol, that is where we do change the fat amount, but just want to let you know that this is the general recommendation for the day, and just the general recommendations that I'm sharing in the slide. If you do have more questions around like how much should it be for yourself, so that is where it's a good idea to have that assessed in one-on-one appointments with the dietitian. And then a serving of a fat is 4 grams. So we'll take some examples here. Again, I would encourage participation with these examples. So use the chat box to participate. So we know that 1 serving of fat is 4 grams. So we have an example of pasta and noodles here. We have fettuccine alfredo homemade recipe, which has Parmesan cheese, it has full fat milk, and it has whipped cream in it. Then they have pasta with tomato and meat sauce. We have chow mein noodles and macaroni and cheese. So based on your general idea around these around these pasta and noodles, which pasta do you think is the lowest in fat? So you can always write that in the chat box, 1, 2, 3, 4. Which one do you think is lowest in fat? Okay, so we got an answer for 1. Anybody else? Oh, 2. Okay. Anybody has a different answer? Or do you go by 1 or 2 as well? Oh, 3. Okay. And we also have 4. Okay. So we have different numbers of pasta noodles here that we think that they're lower in fat. Okay, so we can take a look at here. Thank you everyone for participating. I really appreciate it. So the one that's lowest in fat is pasta with tomato and meat sauce. So the second one. So the reason being is that a lot of times the tomato or the vegetable-based sauces, you will find they're lower in fat. And that is why this kind of pasta is the lowest in fat. With the homemade recipe, the Alfredo one, we do know that there were fat sources like whipped cream, there was full fat milk, and then there was Parmesan cheese added. With mac and cheese too, same idea, we have a lot of those added fats in it. With chow mein noodles, sometimes these noodles are fried, and the sauces that we add, these sauces can be higher in fat too. So that can also increase the fat amount of the noodles or the pasta. So when you're trying to prepare anything like pasta and noodles, it's a good idea to use your vegetable-based sauces. They're also giving you fiber, they're lower fat. With the choice of the noodles and pasta, you can always, choose whole grain varieties, because whole grain varieties are mostly lower in fat, and they're also giving you that benefits of fiber. And you can, for your protein, you can always choose lower fat meats. So that will be your, again, way to cut down on the fat amount. Or you can choose those meatless dishes that we talked about, like tofu or beans or lentils. Those are, again, your lower fat options. And incorporating a lot of vegetables with that meal, because those are, again, your lower fat, high fiber options. So just something, again, you can modify your recipe by these things that we just talked about. But yeah, here the pasta with tomato and meat sauce was the lowest in fat. Let's take a look at the other one. And again, I would encourage everyone to participate. So we have salads. We have garden salad with vinegar, lemon juice, and herbs. We have Caesar salad, Greek salad, and then again garden salad with a tablespoon of Italian dressing. So I want you to answer maybe which salad is highest in fat. Oh, I think you went with the lowest, right? Yeah, okay, yeah. So the lowest one is, I guess everybody might agree with 1. And then the highest, I got an answer for 2. Which other ones do you think might be the higher ones? 2? Everybody's voting for the Caesar salad to be the highest. Okay, that's good. So 2. So let's take a look. Yeah, your first salad is no fat, because as you can see, there's no source of fat in it. It's just vinegar, lemon juice, and herbs. So there's no oil or any kind of fat added in it. But even if you add, let's say, a little bit of olive oil to that dressing, it will not be that high in fat as you can see for the other salads here. So something like the first one you can use as a dressing for your salads. Caesar salad, yes, it's highest in fat because we know a lot of those toppings that we add, right? So there's bacon, there's cheese, the dressing, so they all add the amounts of the fat. Same as with Greek salad, the feta cheese, the dressing, olives are your sources of fat. So here we're trying to eat salad as a healthy thing, but then what we're adding on top of that salad can also increase the fat amount, and then of course the calories coming from these fats. So try to choose something like number 1, and even like I said, if you add a little bit of that olive oil to it, it will not be higher in fat. So when you're choosing, dressings, try to choose more vinegar-based dressings. If you're choosing creamy dressings, maybe look for lower fat ones and maybe adding in less amounts. When you order salad from outside, again, try to maybe order the dip and the salad dressings on the side too, so then you can add a little bit based on what your liking is. All right, and then the last example we have is dinner. So we have cream soup, we have beef pot pie, we have mashed potatoes, which are made with whole milk and margarine. And then we have a dinner roll with a teaspoon of butter or margarine. This whole meal contains 15 teaspoons of fat. So you can write down your suggestions or ideas around how would you lower the fat in this dinner? What would you replace? What would you add? What would you cut out? Okay, so you want to have smaller portion, okay. So drop the butter or margarine. All right. That's good. Use low-fat milk. Yeah, sure. Potatoes. What would you do with the potatoes? Are you trying to like maybe prepare it in a different way? So not adding any milk to potatoes, or having baked potatoes, yeah? Any ideas around cream soup and beef pot pie? So having a vegetable soup, yeah? No cream in the soup. So maybe having some kind of a clear soup too. Make your meat filling, no pie crust. Great ideas. I think those are all good ideas. And little things can make a change in your recipe, right? I'm just gonna wait for maybe a few more seconds if anybody else is still writing their answers or their ideas. No roll, okay. All right, so I think those are all good suggestions. So let's take a look at what suggestions I have here. Oh, there was one more. Skip the roll, already potato, okay, and no pot pie. All right, thank you everyone for participating. So some of the changes that we made here was changing that cream soup to a broth-based soup, but you can definitely have your vegetable soups too, like whatever ideas you had. You can make a stew and you can add like leaner meat to it, and you can add more vegetables to it too. You can still have mashed potatoes, but you can make it with, let's say, chicken broth. You can choose a whole grain dinner roll. I would again avoid the juice part. I would not suggest you drink juice with your meals. So I apologize for that juice in the slide. That is something that we can take it out. But definitely I encourage you all to drink water with your meals. That is best. But if you look at the meal changes that we made from what we had before to now, as you can see, from 15 teaspoons of fat, we reduced it to 3.5 teaspoons. That's a lot of fat that we cut back on. So just trying to find again, ways, if your recipe calls for a particular, let's say, kind of fat that you add, if it's, let's say, calling for butter, could you maybe use less of any other plant-based oil, right? Could you add more vegetables to it? Could you choose whole grain options? Could you choose lower fat meat options, or replace it with those meatless options, right? So just trying to see what can you replace, and little things that we make changes can make a huge impact on our diet with lowering down the fat content. It could be even the sodium, or it could be even the sugar amounts. I will just share one tool here in the chat. There is recipe analyzer. Not sure if everybody is aware of. So recipe analyzer, you can access it to myfitnesspal.com. There's this website, and then there's sparkpeople.com. So if you go on these app or website, that is where you will need to subscribe, and it's free subscription. You can use the recipe analyzer. What the recipe analyzer does is that if you have any recipe and you're not sure how much of fat, sodium, fiber it gives, so what you do is you can put in the ingredients, in that analyzer, and it kind of gives you the nutrition information for your recipe per serving. So that is something that you could make a note of just to become aware of what the nutrition information is there for your recipe. And then if you make changes, then you would know, how much of that nutrient you might be cutting back on, especially we're talking about the fat, the sodium, and the added sugars. All right, so let's move on to the next topic, and that is here we'll talk about the plant sterols and soluble fiber. So plant sterols, these are the substances that are naturally found in very small amounts in our vegetable oils, fruits, and vegetables. They can also help with lowering down your bad cholesterol. They don't affect your HDL, and all we need is 2 grams per day. So some of the studies have shown that if we try to have it naturally from these fruits, from vegetables or vegetable oils, we don't get enough, like we don't get 2 grams per day. In order to get that much amount, we will have to eat large amount of these foods. So for example, it could be like 80 oranges, 200 carrots, and that is not something that's realistic for us to have that much amount of food. So if you were looking for plant sterols, there are a lot of food products available in the market, or multivitamins are available which do have plant sterols in them. So again, an optional thing for you to choose. If you do choose margarine, Bissell has a margarine called Bissell Proactive that has plant sterols in it. Again, if you're going for a multivitamin which has plant sterols, I always suggest please to consult with the pharmacist, just so then, when you're replacing one thing from the other, you're not taking too much of anything. And also to know if it doesn't interact with any of the medications that you're on. So please do have a discussion with the pharmacist. But then those are the food products that you might see that might have that plant sterols added in them. Some of the yogurt drinks or yogurts can also have that added to them. So reading labels will give you that information. Some of the juices also have that, but anyone here who has diabetes, I would not again recommend you have juice. So it's always a better idea to have fruit, but look for other foods where you can get the plant sterol. And then fiber, we've talked about fiber in our previous slide. So here we want to talk about that in detail. So fiber, there are 2 types of fiber. One is the soluble fiber and the other one is insoluble fiber. We benefit from having both kind of fiber in our diet. Soluble fiber kind of forms gel. If you add soluble fiber into water, it forms like gel, it's sticky, and it kind of adds that, feeling of fullness in our body. The insoluble fiber is more to help with keeping us regular. So that's why it's better to have both kind of fiber in our diet. So soluble fiber has shown to help lowering your blood cholesterol level. It also helps with lowering down blood sugar levels, helps with managing diarrhea or symptoms of IBS, reduces risk of getting intestinal ulcers. So there are many, many benefits for having the soluble fiber. So what are the sources of fiber? Fibers are found in all your lentils, your legumes, whole grains we talked about. Fruits are your good sources of fiber. Your vegetables are your good sources of fiber. So trying to incorporate those fiber foods in your diet. And we have here, this slide talks about like how can you increase that fiber intake. So you can consider adding those beans and lentils to your salads, to your soups, stews, pasta sauces, sprinkle ground psyllium husk to oatmeal or cereal. You can even add it to your sauces or yogurt or salads. Again, just a good source of soluble fiber. Try to have at least 2 cups vegetables at your lunch and at your dinner, and that is like closer to 2 handfuls or half a plate. So that would be your amount for your vegetables for your lunch and dinner. If you can see the plate that I'm showing on the camera. And it doesn't matter whether you choose, raw or cooked, whichever way you like having your vegetables. You can choose a side salad with lunch, or you can pack, a container of some raw veggies with some healthy dip. You can grill them, you can steam them, whichever way you like having your vegetables, try to have them. And choose whole grain products with more fiber. So a product which has more fiber means that it should have at least 4 grams above fiber per serving. That is known as a high source of fiber. And a very high source of fiber should have at least over 6 grams of fiber per serving. That is where you're looking at the fiber amounts. And for bread, if you're choosing a high fiber bread, it should have at least 3 grams fiber per slice. So cereal, granola bars, look for something that you want to go over 4 grams per serving. And also don't forget these products do have a lot of sugar in them. So look for something under 5 grams per serving. Even if you can get anything under 8 grams per serving is still okay. Just try to avoid anything that's more than that. But again, determine if it's added source of sugar or a natural source of sugar too. Any questions before we move on to our last part of the presentation, which is the Mediterranean diet? So I'm just going to wait for 1 minute for the questions, and then maybe we can take a 5-minute break if anybody needs to stretch or use the washroom or drink water. We'll come back then, but I'll wait for 1 minute first to address any questions if you have. All right, so maybe we can take a 5-minute break and we can return at maybe 3:35. Please don't go anywhere. Just stretch, go for a stretch, or maybe, if you want to use the washroom or drink water, we'll return at 3:35. All right, so we'll get started. I didn't see any questions, so I guess we're doing okay. Right, so let's talk about the Mediterranean diet. So why are we talking about this diet? A lot of studies have shown that it reduces your risk of developing heart disease. It also helps with lowering down blood cholesterol levels, lowers blood pressure, improves blood sugar control for people who have type 2 diabetes. And early research shows it may also reduce risk of other chronic diseases, including some cancers, diabetes, metabolic syndrome, dementia, obesity, and mental health problems. So the general principles of Mediterranean diet are it includes fruits and vegetables, a lot of whole grains, legumes like dried beans, peas, and lentils, nuts and seeds, and olives. Fish and poultry are consumed in moderate amounts, very small amounts of red meat. Olive oil is the main source of fat, and moderate consumption of wine, mainly with meals. And then also the Mediterranean diet focuses on a healthy lifestyle or pattern, which includes being active, getting enough rest, sharing meals with family and friends. So that's whole, like just the general principles of this diet. So this is what the Mediterranean pyramid looks like, and we'll talk about each section in detail. So the first one is enjoying the Mediterranean lifestyle. So taking the time to cook and prepare meals whenever possible. Enjoy cooking and sharing meals together with friends and family. It also includes eating 3 meals a day and aiming for that 30 minutes of physical activity each day, a minimum of that, and getting enough rest. So these are all things that will help again if you were wanting to follow the Mediterranean diet. That is something, again, a part of that is the lifestyle too. So just the next slide is more about how can you include exercise. So just some ideas there. Try to do something that you like doing, should be more enjoyable for you. It is a good idea to have a goal around your physical activity, about when, how much, where are you going to do, what are you going to do. Also, can you keep a track of the progress, right? So just trying to think about all those goals think about those things when you're making a goal around physical activity. A good idea to think about what could be some of the potential barriers and how can you overcome them. So it just helps to keep you stay on track with your goal. When you're choosing physical activity, it should also be suitable to your physical condition. So starting with small amounts and then gradually try to increase as you are able to tolerate it. Aiming for regular exercise. For some people, having a partner with them can also give you that support and increase that motivation. So you could also do that. And anybody who has diabetes here attending the presentation, it's a good idea to test your blood sugars before and after, just so then you get to know more about your body. How does your exercise really help with improving your blood sugars? And for somebody who is on certain medication or insulin that has a risk for causing lows, that is where it's a good idea again to test before and after, just so then you can catch those lows or prevent those lows. So the next part of the pyramid talks about choosing plant-based foods more often. So that is where we talk about a lot of vegetables. So they do say try to eat vegetables again at lunch and dinner. Enjoy eating legumes more often, choose more whole grain varieties, and using good fats. So olives, unsalted nuts and seeds, and they use olive oil because that's the main source of fat in the Mediterranean diet. So using olive oil to cook and flavor your food with spices and herbs instead of the salt. So you can add like ginger, garlic, onion, but avoid adding the salt. The next one is fish, seafood, and water. So drinking plenty of water, fish and seafood, at least incorporating that 2 times per week, and choosing those fatty fishes like salmon, sardines, herring. You can choose tuna, And also if you like having any seafood, so that's where the suggestion is that you can choose those two. Again, these foods are good sources of omega-3 as well, so that is where you can see the benefits of having those foods. And poultry and dairy in moderation, so choosing more of your leaner meats when you do choose meats, and then choosing lower fat milk and alternatives. And if you do drink alcohol, again, wine is something that's a part of the Mediterranean diet, so limit to moderate amounts, which means one glass per day for women and 2 glasses per day for men, and a standard drink size would be 5 ounces. So that is, again, a part of that Mediterranean diet. And the last tip of that pyramid talks about that red meat and then, sweet consumption. So choosing red meats less often, or processed meats. So trying to replace those more with leaner meats and maybe that fatty fish, if you enjoy that. And also limiting the sweets, so keeping them in moderation. So the sweets could be like candies, pastry, desserts. It could be any, those sugary beverages. So trying to keep that in moderation. So that is where we talked about that Mediterranean diet. And if you think about this diet, again, it's more similar to what we also talked about in our previous slides, like heart healthy eating. So a lot of things are pretty much the same. And that is where it tells us that if we do kind of eat like this, it is helping towards lowering down our blood pressure, or our cholesterol, even our blood sugars, because again, it's promoting more of that plant-based eating. And also the meat choices are leaner, right? So lower sodium, like they're choosing more herbs to add flavor to their food instead of the salt. So that's where it's showing that benefit on our health. So this slide is more of a comparison between typical North American diet and what the Mediterranean diet, like food choices are. So if you were to look at the beverages, in a typical North American diet, you'll see a lot of like juices, fruit drinks, pop, specialty coffee and tea consumption. The Mediterranean diet beverage choices are more water, herbal tea, coffee, again, without sugar. The fat choices, here, as you can see, is more of like vegetable oil, butter, margarine. The Mediterranean diet focuses more on the olive oil or olive oil-based margarines. A lot of refined starches you will find in the typical North American diet, which includes potatoes, white bread, pasta, rice, so a lot of refined grains. We just learned about the Mediterranean diet. It is more about the whole grain varieties in your bread, pasta, rice, whichever ones you choose. Then the milk, again, a lot of full fat dairy sources, higher fat milk, cream, ice cream, cheese, and yogurt. The Mediterranean diet talking about the lower fat milk and alternatives. A lot of red meat consumption and processed meat consumption in the North American diet. Whereas the Mediterranean diet, we just learned about, incorporates like fish, seafood, leaner meats, but again, choosing them in moderate amounts. And snack foods, again, are higher in like saturated fats and sodium, as you can see, the chips, candy, baked goods, a lot of added sugars also in these foods. The Mediterranean diet snack choices are more on focused towards having fresh fruit, unsalted nuts and seeds, hummus, if anybody here enjoys that. So you could choose those kind of snack options there, along with your crackers or pita. So just again, a comparison between the food choices. So putting all this information together one meal at a time. So start with using the plate method, which I just showed you here, to use this as a guide to add that balance to your meals and controlling the portions. So as this plate talks about that, it should be like an 8-inch or 9-inch plate, and then dividing the plate into 2 halves, and then again dividing into 2 halves again, like one section. So this quarter of your plate should be for your grains and starches. So again, choosing more of whole grain varieties here. So whether it's whole grain bread for your breakfast, or it could be a wrap for your lunch, it could be pasta or noodles or potato for your dinner. So choosing this plate as a guide for each meal. Then choosing your other quarter part of your plate for your protein. So choosing leaner options of your meat. It could be lentils or legumes. It could be egg whites. It could be nut butters. It could be low-fat cheese. So those are your protein options. And then half a plate for your vegetables. So again, like I said before, cooked, raw, doesn't matter, whichever way you like having them, but choose variety of vegetables. So some green colored, some different colored, because they all are giving you different antioxidants and of course different variety of minerals and vitamins. So that's how you want to incorporate your plate, use that plate as a guide to balance your meals and planning your meals too. We are missing on 2 food groups in this plate, which is your fruit and your milk or yogurt, so your dairy source. So that is something that you could use as your food group options for your breakfast or between your meals as a snack if you do feel hungry. And you can choose the heart healthy eating, which we talked about in the beginning. So that's where we were talking about replacing those saturated fats with more of the healthier sources of fats, which are your unsaturated fats. And that is like your plant-based oil, nuts and seeds, trying to cut back on that added sugar and of course a lot of sodium. So that is your heart healthy eating, and gradually increasing the fiber intake. And if you do wish, you could follow the Mediterranean diet. Again, based on the research, how it's showing it has good benefits on our health. So consider following the Mediterranean diet. So just the summary of our presentation, which we just kind of summarized, but I'll just do it one more time here. So limiting the saturated fats and avoid the trans fats, and the saturated fat sources would be like your high fat meats, your full fat dairy sources, butter, lard, tropical oil. So try to limit them. Not saying that you need to completely avoid them, but keep them in moderation. Avoid the trans fats. So when you're looking at the label, look for 0 gram of trans fats. Replace the saturated fats with more of your healthier fats. So using plant-based oils, nuts and seeds, avocado, but also watch the amount of the fats. Remember, fats are as such like very high in calories. So if you're trying to manage weight or lose weight, that can be harder if you're trying to eat a lot of, have a lot of fat intake in your diet. So choose more healthier options for sure, but keep the fat amounts in moderation, and limit the added sugar and limit the salt. So trying to read labels to look for lower sugar and lower salt foods. Avoid adding salt to your cooking or at the table. Try to make your own foods as much as you can, because you can control a lot of ingredients, and add flavor to your food by adding, let's say, ginger, garlic, onion, lemon, or other herbs, but avoid adding salt. And again, like I said, consider following the Mediterranean diet. So I asked this question in the beginning of the presentation. So out of all the nutrition or the lifestyle changes that we talked about, what is one change that you would like to make to eat better? So try to think about that one change if you haven't thought about, and start from there.